use the word emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 1357.IS4031, certificate number 20800, Ultrarunning.
In the very early days of the Omnibus project, I think our very third entry, the first one we did here in Seattle, we talked about marathon running. So I assume you and I have had this conversation before, but what's the longest you've ever run?
Well, I was in cross country in high school.
Oh, I didn't know you were cross country.
And I was not very good at cross country.
I thought you were all skiing all the time.
And I was in cross country skiing in high school, but I was in cross country running for one fateful year.
Do you enjoy physical culture?
Physical culture. What I enjoyed was socially. I was social with the cross-country runners. There was something about, as you know, cross-country runners are the real wits of the sports world. They tend to be just so fun. They're not really. They're mostly Scandinavians. And
at my school, they were kind of the light, skinny kids who also enjoyed fantasy role-playing games.
Yeah, and they tend to be quiet, introverted people. But for whatever reason, I socially hung out with the cross-country runners. And my dad was of the opinion that cross-country running was a virtuous sport that would make a young man turn his thoughts to higher pursuits.
Adults really do like to see children have a bad time for an extended amount of time.
That's right.
I think the idea is there's going to be a lot of this in life.
Get out there.
Let's model it now in some kind of laboratory conditions.
Yeah. Build character, beat yourself up, be out of breath for an hour. And it ended up that my high school girlfriend was a competitive cross-country runner and skier. So socially it did translate into a kind of culture for me. And a lot of my friends throughout high school were part of the cross-country scene.
What's an event then? Like what's a...
it was, the small ones were 5Ks, the long ones were 10Ks. I was not an exceptional runner. The first few races I was pretty bad, but by the end of that year, I was able to kind of stay in the middle back end of the pack. The first race I ever ran in cross country, I came in last by several minutes. Everyone
had gone home except for your parents.
Yeah, it's a story I've told before where the best runner on the team, a guy by the name of Matt Olness, was coaching me before the race, and he said, look, when the gun goes off, you got to get out in front of the pack because, everybody starts on this big wide line, but then the pack narrows down to kind of single track. And if you get out in front, then you're not stuck behind a bunch of people as the trail winds its way. Mm-hmm. And so the gun went off and I just took off like a rabbit. And I was running the JV race. And so no one had ever seen me run before. And pretty soon I'm 50 yards ahead of everybody else, just way out front. And I can see the crowd on either side cheering as I run past, looks of amazement. And I look behind me and I'm like, I'm the greatest cross-country runner the world has ever seen. What why did I not know
You've been keeping your light under a bushel.
that this was my gift? And basically what I was doing was sprinting the first quarter mile. And when I got to, the half mile point, the first runner started, went past me. And by the time I rounded the corner and started up the first hill,
there were still like 2.5 miles left, and you were.
And I was, and then it was just like.
Are there usually hills? I guess I didn't think that way about cross country. Yes,
yes, there are, and in at least in Alaska, I mean, all of our cross country races were either on golf courses or cross country ski trails, but it was fall, and so the trails were dirt.
Yeah.
Anyway, I limped in across the finish line. After the school bus had already started its motor. I got better, but I was never. It was hard for me to cross. Cross country is not my sport.
There are people who enjoy it,
who love it.
Yeah, it's. I find that I enjoy stopping. I've been running Green Lake this summer, which is 3 miles. So it's about a 5K.
Yeah.
But then I got to drag myself back up the hill. But it's really the best part is how good you feel after you're done, and really the key to that emotion is the fact that you're not running anymore. And I guess you could capture that just by never running in the first place. But for some reason, I'm not attuned to the pleasure of not running yet.
In answer to your question, my longest race was probably 10K, and I think I spent the entire race wishing it was over.
That's a long time to run.
Yeah.
I guess
7 miles and more.
It's not too late for us. You and I could become distance runners. Our friend Peter Sagal became a marathon runner in his early 40s.
Peter has the
has now written
advantage
books about it
of being 5'7" or whatever, and that's I think an advantage if you're getting into it late
because of your knees. You mean there's less?
But I've also
less tissue above them.
I've torn an ACL in one of my knees, and all the meniscus is gone. When I walk around,
was it during that first race when Matt Olness lied to you?
No, it was at a Grateful Dead concert with Edie Brickell opening at RFK Stadium in 1989.
And you were climbing up you were climbing up some of the scaffolding.
I jumped off of the outfield wall. Yeah, I screwed up a lot as a kid, as a young person. I broke every bone in my body.
Have you ever stage dived as a performer?
Yes.
But
you mean when it was my show?
Yes.
I've definitely stood on the edge of the stage, turned around, and fallen backwards into the crowd. But I've done quite a bit of. In the early 90s, quite a bit of get up on stage, run as fast as you can,
at a punk or a grunge
fly out into the crowd.
But you also did it in the outfield wall, so you were in the back of the.
I did. It was an amazing night.
Who was playing Edie?
Edie Brickell was done. The Dead had been spending a lot of time getting set up. I was way up in the stands in the back of the stadium,
both geographically and psychically.
Yeah,
probably?
doing I don't know what, just talking to people, just getting to know people up there in the very far back of the stadium. And then all of a sudden, the clouds came over the stadium, and it was a lightning storm. Dark, dark clouds poured over. RFK is an open field. Poured over the top of the stadium, and lightning started to strike, like flash and thunder. And then the Dead took the stage, all at the same moment.
Whoa.
And, if you're at a Dead concert, you're already predisposed to being really ready to trip out.
What do you mean?
I was just totally ready to oh my God, have my mind just blown by this whoa and lightning and whoa man, oh no. And the Dead start. Bing boom bing and I'm I'm at the back and I gotta get to the front, man. What am I even doing? And I ran and all the people were crowding their way down into the field, and I was I've got a better way, man. I'm not going to just go on the stairs with all the other people. I'm going to fly. I'm going to fly to the front. And so
you're like a kid putting on a Superman cape and jumping out a window.
I hurdled the railing, and I was on the outfield wall. I mean, I was 30 feet above the ground and just fell like a dumb blob. And there were some hippies on the ground below me. And so as I was falling, in order not to hit them, land on them, I had to also twist.
Well, that's nice that hippie prevention was your number one.
I don't want to kill anybody.
Not even hippies?
But I completely dislocated my knee and tore my ACL.
You took one for the team.
I did. I took one for the team, which was
for the generation
those dumb hippies who are probably 60 years old now and living in Baltimore.
They're running marathons.
And they have no idea that I've
got a torn meniscus.
Suffered the rest of my life on their behalf.
Only 1 in 1,000 Americans has run a marathon. So you could be 0.1%.
1 in 1,000?
Yeah.
That seems like a lot of people who have run a marathon. I would have said it was 1 in 100,000. But no, that doesn't make sense. That there's more people running in marathons than that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you've never done it, it just seems like a superhuman feat. Run 26.2 miles? No, I'm not even close to that. But like my sister did it, and she's just kind of a fit normal. She's a regular person.
Right.
So you can trick your body into running 26.2 miles, which is just interesting to think about. It tends to, it's like one of these things about how we all have these we like to imagine we all have these untapped. It's why people love the myth of we only use 10% of our brains, because we apparently only do use 10% of our legs. If most of us are running 0 miles a day, but most of us could get to 26 with a few months of thinking about it.
It seems to be a thing, like for me, swimming is very difficult because although I'm buoyant, like every human is buoyant, I'm buoyant in a way where my nose is just under the water.
I'm less buoyant. I have to do a weird arching thing to breathe and be buoyant.
And when I see people who are just 10% more buoyant, that's all it takes for you to be able to float with your mouth above the water, right? Like the difference between buoyant and not buoyant is just the difference of 4 inches between whether your nose is underwater or your nose is above the water. It's not that much, but it's all the difference in the world, because when I'm in the water, I'm just struggling to stay up.
When's the next breath coming?
But other people just sit and just happily just float along. And I feel like that's true in distance running too, that there's something that allows...
It's something physiological, makes it much easier for most people?
Or for some people to just be like, oh, run? Sure, I'll run. Oh, keep running? Sure, I'll keep running. But for me to like run to the end of the block first I just have to get I just feel like a rhinoceros. It's just like, okay, here we go. And now everything is moving and it all hurts. And now I just, please let this be over.
Well, nobody's judging your form. So,
thank you.
If you can, in a marathon, as far as I know.
But like the idea of running for 20 minutes, let alone for 4 hours. And I have so many friends that do it. They're just like, I'm going running, and they put their headphones on and they run, and it's like 3 hours later and they've just been running. So they reach a state.
I think maybe you could, and you just haven't been in that state.
I don't believe it. I don't believe I can.
You don't think there is a state?
I don't believe that I can achieve that state. I believe that state is achievable for some people. And I don't know the difference between us. Is it some kind of BMI? Or, is it a thrust to weight ratio? It's
probably just some kind of inner virtue. Like the runners are better people than we are.
That's what my dad thinks.
They just, they put their mind to it.
They put their mind.
Have you thought of putting your mind to it?
Oh, that would solve so many problems.
Maybe you need better shoes. It's got to be the shoes.
It's got to be the shoes.
But the fact that 1 in 1,000 Americans has run a marathon means it's not, if you're some kind of, if you're interested in being a fitness elite, that means, it's 300,000 people, by the way. I can help you with that.
Are we still assuming that there are 300 million Americans?
There's about 300 million Americans.
Oh, I thought that number had gone up. It's one of those things where when we were little, I was like, there are 6 billion people in the world, and then one day it was.
Well, when I was a kid, it was always, you could always say 250 million Americans, and now I think it's much closer to 300. The latest census, we don't have census numbers. The latest estimate is it's upward. It's 330 million.
Yeah, there we go. So 300,000 people have run a marathon.
But that just, so that gives you a bumper sticker, but it doesn't make you a superhero. Like to normals like us, to me, that seems like a superheroic feat. How exciting.
24 miles.
That people, that we evolved to be able to do that. And in fact, we're one of the best species at it. Like almost no species on Earth can outrun a human over that distance.
Not in speed, but in stamina.
Yeah. Most breeds of horse you can outrun if the race is long enough. But if you're seeking a truly elite experience, you want something that fewer people can do. And that's why there's a much smaller group of people that sneers at marathoners.
Are they the the triathloners.
I mean, you could do that. You could bring in other stuff. But let's say let's say you're a purist.
Okay, I am one.
You're in it for, just like you, they love running.
Yes.
They're in it for the running.
They collect swords. They want one of every kind.
They like to run like a rhinoceros. And so there's common races for these ultra marathoner types, a 50K, 100K, or even the most common lengths goes up to 50 miles or a 100-mile race. So essentially running 4 marathons back to back, a little less. And, most of these people, if they're good runners, their marathon times are going to be around 3, under 4 hours, maybe around 3. So that's a day of running. They just are going to run all day, dawn to dusk, and you can cover 100 miles. That's pretty good.
I'm going to out myself here as being close friends with an ultra runner. And I know that it seems like not on brand for me.
No, it does.
But we know, you and I both, I mean, you know him, he's come up on the show before. We know someone who runs 100-mile ultra runs through the night until the morning. Ultra marathoner.
Or I don't know if I'm thinking of the right person.
Who do you think you're thinking of?
Is it a musician?
It is a musician.
Is it a musician that I didn't recognize the last time I saw him running?
It is a musician who has routinely said that when he runs into you, you don't remember him.
Yeah, I saw him booking down a trail.
Yeah.
And I assume he ran up that trail as well.
Yeah.
Really?
We're talking about lead singer and guitarist of Death Cab for Cutie, Ben Gibbard, who...
And he will run 100-mile races?
At some point in the last 10 years, decided at first that he was going to be a runner, and then decided that wasn't enough, and he was going to be a marathoner, and then discovered that was not enough.
He's chasing a new high.
And so I remember the first time he ran a 50K, and then the first time he ran a 50-miler, and then a 100-miler. And he's done races where you run all night long and run until the next day. But a lot of these are also mountain runs.
Yeah.
So you're running 100 miles, but it's not just across the flat pavement. You're running up and over a mountain range.
I've always thought it was bull that marathons had hills. Like, you're making these just kind of normal folks run 26 miles. Just pick a path that doesn't have any hills. For crying out loud.
The hill is the worst part. But so here is a friend, a person
inspiring.
I've known for 20 plus years, now 24 years, and he and I share a lot. We sit and talk, but I have no earthly idea what it is like to be him or to do this thing. It's like he's an astronaut, and I cannot relate to it at all.
But you've implied that it's something he decided. And I think we agree that you and I could not decide to throw a 95-mile-per-hour fastball.
He can also do that.
Wait, really?
Ben Gibbard was a very successful high school baseball pitcher and thought for a long time that he was going to go into professional baseball. That was his dream. And I don't think he could make the cut. He couldn't throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. He could only throw a 80-mile-an-hour fastball.
It just seems like distance running compared to I'm going to start in the NBA or I'm going to kick 50-yard field goals. It is something that just regular folks decide to do, and they work their way up to remarkable feats because it seems to be in our genetic ability, it's our evolutionary heritage to be able to run across the plains.
Is it because, as you said, no animal can outrun us, so it was a hunting strategy that we would just run animals down?
You just run it till it gets tired. Like the zebra can beat you for 3 miles, but it can't beat you for 8 miles.
And that's really what it is. There's not some other reason that we evolved this ability to just plod for. Because I know that people who are following along the program that are playing Kenger, the famous.
It's a bingo
bingo.
This is the Futurelings Facebook game.
Yeah, the Futurelings on Facebook play a bingo with this show where if we mention Hitler. I guess Hitler's not on the board, but if
Hitler should be the center square.
If we there are a lot of topics that if we mention it in the show, it allows people playing Kenger to get a bingo, and one of those is my walk across Europe.
That's the free space again.
But a bunch of a big part of my motivation going into it was that there was something about long distance ultra travel on foot
covered by you.
Yes.
Because that's a very, you could do that by day in a car, but that doesn't feel the same.
No, but that somehow that with your with your belongings on your back, that this steady, methodical plodding, the rhythm of the steps, the time outside where you watch the sun go from one horizon to the other, that there was some kind of human wisdom I could unlock in doing that would, that I wasn't just leaving consumerism behind, that I was going into a thing where my body would click into a level of enlightenment that you could only attain by going on a great either pilgrimage or diaspora, that it was something intrinsically human.
I believe in this, by the way. I can't do it while I'm running because I'm too busy thinking about how I wish I wasn't running.
Yeah.
But just being disconnected from life, just sitting in an airplane, you have all these ideas you don't have on the ground. What did you find about how it changed your consciousness to walk through 8 countries or whatever? What
it ended up being was, when I talk to people that have studied meditation, who have done 10-day silent retreats and whatnot, that when they talk about what you're trying to, and I mean, I guess intrinsic to meditating is to not be trying to X, Y, or Z, but the effect of meditating for great periods, as they describe what it's like inside to be kind of wrestling with all the different selves that there are. It's I can absolutely relate to it, because in a way I was meditating for 8 to 10 hours a day with this kind of slow walk.
Maybe you should have brought a Walkman.
I know, or a camera, or whatever, a deck of cards, but I didn't. I just sat and listened to the wind and looked at the treetops. And it really was, in a way, an excruciating experience, because I was wearing the hair shirt.
Too much you?
Oh, no, well, that, but also just like, why are you doing this? This is really hard.
Well, I would find it boring, I think. Like, is that an issue?
But beyond, you go so far beyond boring,
oh,
right?
Boring's like the first hour.
Yeah, you're so far through that, because you're not talking to anybody. That whole time, it's not like you're walking with a companion that isn't already in your mind.
How long before you go crazy and just start talking to nothing, talking to trees, talking to the wind?
I mean, inside your mind, I was talking to trees and the wind and the 14 other people that were inside for months at a time. So, but ultra running feels like that also, right? The one way I can relate to it is the idea that you would be transported. You'd have to be transported to a place where you were responding to pain in a different way. Pain was no longer, clearly it's still an issue, but like somehow you're pushing past the pain, pushing through it, and it's not just physical pain. It would have to be pushing through psychological pain too.
I've definitely had the pride of doing that, the pride of, doing something with pain, but I've never had it transform the discomfort or pain for me. Like, the best I can do is like not dwell on it. I've never had the moment of how it all goes away and you realize that everything's transitory and
right.
I don't need to dwell on the pain in my own life.
My understanding is that in ultra running, that the body actually, your bones actually are destroyed and rebuilt.
Apparently it's terrible for you. I was looking at a 2018 study financed by the NIH. 50 to 60% of people who are ultra runners have musculoskeletal problems. Pathological processes, which is a nice way to say disease-like destruction,
right,
takes place in your skeletal muscles, your heart, your liver, your kidneys, your immune system, and your endocrine glands. The majority have digestive problems or gastrointestinal bleeding, upper respiratory problems. What's interesting is that all this is temporary. This happens while you are punishing your body with a 100-mile run, but it tends to go away.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's just what you would expect, which is 100 miles is a dumb thing to do.
Yeah, all this stuff is your endocrine system's way of being like, I cannot actually function while you're draining all my cell processes this way.
So Ben suggested that the bones of ultra marathoners, through this process of like breaking them down, sort of like with muscle building, but the bones actually regrow harder and denser that you can actually remake your skeleton into the skeleton of an ultra runner.
Into the skeleton of your dreams?
Yeah, and then you just add some
Well,
adamantium.
I don't want a denser Wolverine skeleton. It seems like it would make it harder to run.
I don't know.
I need to get like a light bird skeleton.
Yeah, bird skeleton. More than you have now.
I mean, 100-mile runs that's about as long as you can go in a day, but there are many multi-day runs as well. Like even 100 miles is nothing to someone who wants to run, who has the time, I guess, to run for days or weeks. The fad for multi-day running actually goes back to the 1870s.
What, really?
Yeah, there was a very common event that was a 6-day race. You couldn't run 7 days in a row because that's the Lord's Day. Yeah.
Right.
But people would run Monday to Saturday, often on tracks with huge audiences, like audiences of tens of thousands of people would come to watch, people just go and go and go on a track all week.
Oh, so it wasn't like the old fashioned Olympics where you ran from Sparta to Athens. They just ran on a track.
Not at first. Even to this day, a lot of these events take places on tracks because it's easier to staff and run. And, you don't have to spread out aid stations across a country. You can just have people running past the same orange slices. But there were multiple kinds of these races. We should probably do a whole omnibus on race walking. There was a lot of this. It was called, the fad was called pedestrianism.
Really?
And a lot of the times people would have to walk. You'd have to have the heel of one foot touched down by the
you couldn't fly.
You were not allowed to fly. You were not allowed to remake your skeleton into any
as far as you could tell.
Gibbardium, a new substance invented by Ben Gibbard. You would have, you could not lift one. People who are running have both feet in the air at the same time.
Yes.
As early photography
flying
proved. They're very briefly flying. In race walking, you have to have one foot down before the next one comes up. So you get people doing it at speed have a very odd kind of jerky gait.
When was the last
especially
time
if you play
Speedwalker?
yakety sax. I have literally, like in person?
Yeah, like do you see them on Green Lake?
I've seen, no. I feel like I used to see old people at the mall, but to them, speed walking is not what it is to a serious kind of, it doesn't look like Andy Serkis doing a thing or a marionette.
I feel like in the 80s, you would see people with that weird stork-like speed walking thing.
Yeah.
But it seemed so uncomfortable, so like just
it doesn't look like it can be good for your joints.
No, at any second you could just dislocate your whole everything.
I mean, jogging really is rough on your knees and ankles, but it looks smooth.
Yeah. Depending if you're not a rhinoceros.
I'm sure when Peter Sagal does it, it looks like a gazelle, and you're the rhinoceros chasing him down.
We talked a little bit about the Chilkoot Trail on this show, and when I was hiking the Chilkoot Trail with my family, which took us 5 or 6 days. At one point, at the top of the pass, when we were waking up in the morning, kind of boiling our water on our little gas stoves to make hot cocoa and coffee, 3 guys ran up over the pass in their, they came over the top of the pass where we had made our camp, and they were in shorts and T-shirts and had water bottles, and they ran past us on this trail that, that up until that point, I had thought, why would human beings,
how does this trail even exist?
How would they subject themselves to this over weeks at a time? And these 3 just ran past us. And these were 70s running shorts too, with the
sinewy thighs glistening.
And my mouth agape, one of my cousins looked at me and said, oh yeah, they're running the whole trail in a day, 33 miles.
I feel that's the way when I see people biking uphill. I'm just like, how are you doing that? It's like somebody tilted the camera. When we were in Montana this summer, we were, the thing you can always do at ski resorts is in the summer is often you can take a gondola to the top and then walk down the trail.
Oh, that's
which
nice.
is a lot more fun.
Ride a mountain bike even.
Yeah, and lots of kids are mountain biking, and then hang the bike on the gondola and head back up. We were just gonna go to the top, enjoy the views, and then kind of walk down the trail through the wildflowers. And it was a nice way to spend a couple hours.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
But we saw this family who had decided they were definitely some kind of a tanned, leathery outdoor family, where their activity was going to be
go up the hill.
Well,
in lederhosen.
I bet they did that. I wonder if they walked up, but however their day started, it ended with them running down the trail.
Oh, running down.
So we had to, and it's parents and 2 little kids, and they are just charging down this trail.
Then you're already in pain.
Yeah,
walking down.
My knees are hurting just looking at them, and we ducked. We had to get to the side because they're charging down. And, you try to give people a wide berth on a trail, especially during a pandemic.
Right.
And then we passed them again eating lunch, I think. And then, we had just passed them and all of a sudden they come running by us again. And I'm like, these poor kids. Cause it's like
How old are they?
it's like a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old just charging on the spot. But Dylan and I came around the corner and we saw this family and the girl is just screaming because she's skinned her leg like knee to ankle. And the parents are like, come on, shake it off. Let's get a band. They're mercurochroming her up or whatever you use today.
Right.
Bactining her up. And, it was really just very predictable that you could have seen this coming. You can't just have a 5-year-old run down a mountain. They're not built for that.
Yeah. Although all that stuff, I mean, you've raised your kids kind of like I've raised mine, which is to say, here are these kids that we're now responsible for. We've got to keep them fed and clothed and presumably read to them until they can read to themselves. But neither of us put a violin in our children's hands when they were 3. We didn't teach them to break dance. We didn't
make little trick North Korean kids out of them. And, and in hindsight, why not? Why didn't we?
Yeah, that's right. It just feels like,
missed opportunity.
Why did I not force her at gunpoint to learn how to play the drums or do something cool so that she would make me look like a cool dad? But I do definitely feel like that kind of yodelahy who sort of, I mean, I have friends whose kids are incredible skiers at 6, 7 years old because that's what the family does. Get that kid up on skis and go. And I feel bad that I didn't make my daughter an incredible something.
Maybe you just can't. I don't know. Maybe you can't.
Regular person.
Maybe everybody tries, and those are the ones that turn out are the ones whose kids did not kick and scream like my kids did when I said, "Hey, how about a weekly piano lesson?" It's funny that now my kids are at an age where they're kind of rediscovering all the stuff that they quit at younger ages. And, my son's enjoying chess, and he's been, he'll sit down at the piano and play the beginning of Satie's Gymnopédie or whatever, but it's because it was his idea.
Uh-huh.
Like when it was my idea for him to try the chess club or to take piano lessons, no way. The invention of the bicycle kind of killed the pedestrianism fad because you could now go see people doing stuff faster.
Right, a velodrome.
Right. That's even more exciting. So suddenly, and it really just speaks to how boring life was in the 1870s, that 70,000 people would show up to watch race walking. But multi-day racing, ultrarunning took a new step in the 20th century. Ever since 1920, it was the first LA to New York run, which takes place over a lot of these multi-day races.
LA to New York.
And this one took 84 days, the very first Bunyan Derby, as they called it in 1928. And there are still long...
1928? You would have been really out in the...
Yeah, there were not good roads.
Right. Zigzagging the whole way.
There were not... to this day, there are these kind of long races like that. Like in 2003, there was a Trans-Europe race from Lisbon to Moscow.
Oh, they went the opposite way of my ex.
Did they cross you?
Must have done. What year? What year did they do?
2003.
Oh no, I was already long gone by then.
Well, you missed it. Well, you would have had to wait. There's like a crosswalk,
right.
Crosswalk in Hungary or something. And
some guy with a flag would have.
I don't think they're all together in one big peloton if it's like an 84-day race across America.
Yeah, maybe not.
But in a lot of these races, it stretches out over days. There's generally a leg you're supposed to run in a day, and your times are recorded. In some of these multi-day races, there's not even a distance; it's a time, and whoever runs the longest over the time is the ultra running champion. But today, many of these multi-day events ultra running multi-day events are limited to one person. It's more of a Forrest Gump kind of ththing where
you just challenge yourself, or everybody leaves like once an hour, or how do they?
No, it's just one person who has somehow got their own quixotic pursuit.
And
maybe they're doing it in
local
news is interested. Maybe more likely they're doing it for colon cancer or for the blind or whatever it is. And this is how ultra running happens today. And that kind of makes it a position of privilege because it has to be somebody who can take 6 weeks off of work to run across Southeast Asia or Mexico or whatever it is.
It's like bodybuilding in the sense that at the lower economic scale, there are people who are very muscular because they work. And there are people who can run really far because they have to run barefoot to the next town.
That's something I've noticed online. Is there's a lot of behaviors that link the very poor and the very wealthy.
Yeah,
you know,
and then at the other end,
eccentric clothing, for example.
Exactly. At the upper end, you have to have all this leisure time to do Pilates 7 days a week or to do dance church, and ultra running has to be that too.
Because it's something of an activity of privilege. This is when I should introduce my favorite ultra runner, the person whose story got me interested in this topic, Ranulph Twistleton Wykeham Fiennes.
Ranulph Twistleton Wykeham Fiennes absolutely must be related to
the third baronet of Banbury.
The Fiennes brothers.
Yeah, he's Ranulph Fiennes is the third cousin of Rafe and Joseph Fiennes, the actors, or maybe of their father. He has the triple-barreled last name that comes with somebody with a last name inheriting some kind of hyphenated last name.
Right.
I think the record right now in the UK is 4. There are a few quadruple-barreled families. But Sir Ranulph Twistleton Wykeham Fiennes goes by Ranulph or Ran Fiennes, and he is kind of the foremost explorer of our post-exploration era.
He's a baron?
He's a baronet.
A baronet.
The third baronet of Banbury, and I hope there will be no follow-up questions about the difference.
And so he's still out.
I believe British peerage does not have a baron, like where other European peerages have systems of nobility have a baron. Maybe they have earl instead of count. I don't know, but their scale
baronets
is different.
So he's out there exploring what's behind the dumpsters in the parking lots of the Walmarts. Where everything else has been explored in the world.
He's a geocacher. No, often people in that situation have to create by imposing they're just like an artist. By imposing new strictures on their exploration, they can come up with a thing that nobody has done.
Right, around the world in 100 days.
Exactly. In fact, he has circumnavigated the earth in a very odd way, as we shall see. It's kind of like when you see when you're watching a sports event and they say, well, this pitcher is actually 8-0, against the Padres at night. You know, like you have to invent a very small niche to award somebody any kind of record or superlative. In his case, he was with the British Army for a long time. The last couple of years of his service in the early 70s in the Sultanate of Oman, where he discovered that both the Sultan that he had been dispatched to protect and the communist militias he was protecting the Sultan against were equally awful. And that ended his...
I don't think that's an unfamiliar story.
He was shocked to discover...
Wait a minute. Are you saying both sides are bad?
But he did his duty for his final 2 years and then got out of the army and became kind of a professional post-exploration explorer. And it's funny to read about his exploits because he is very much a man out of time. This is a guy who returned to Oman to uncover the lost city of Ubar from under the sands. However,
he got to it before I did.
He did this in 1992.
The lost city of Ubar.
Imagine your name can be Sir Ranulph Fiennes, the Baronet of Banbury, and you're finding the lost city of Ubar, but it's not 1922, it's 1992.
Wow. Nice job.
He's doing this at the height of grunge.
Sir Ranulph Fiennes.
And all his other accomplishments are very much, will you love a man out of time? He circumnavigated the earth, but he did it from 1979 to 1982. When it was a lot easier. But no, wait for it.
On a unicycle.
He circumnavigated the earth on the polar axis. So instead of going around the equator, he went from the North Pole down to the South Pole and then back up.
Whoa!
And he followed the Greenwich Meridian as closely as possible.
Whoa!
And he did the whole thing on foot or boat, like no trains or whatever.
So he walked across Antarctica?
He walked across the polar ice cap and across Antarctica. I think
seems like the hardest part of that.
With dog sledges. In order to make Antarctica harder nowadays, you have to do things like... in 2012, he wanted to become the first person to dog sled across Antarctica during the winter. Everybody else goes during our winter, the Antarctic summer. But he's got to be the first. If you want to be the first guy to do something,
it's 100 below zero or whatever with a 100 mile an hour wind.
And if you look at a picture of this guy, he just looks like, some kind of upper class dad you'd see at a bar at a nice London hotel. In his own stories, he's had many adventures, including some that intersect with celebrity. He was in stories he's told on Top Gear, for example. He once, as a military prank, blew up the dam that the 20th Century Fox had built to shoot Dr. Dolittle in the UK, and he was fed up and blew up the dam. He also has described himself as one of the finalists for the role of James Bond in the early 70s that ultimately went to Roger Moore.
First of all, what kind of name is Ranulph?
I'm not even 100% sure I'm saying it right, and I don't care to look.
Okay. Ranulph.
It's close enough to Randolph to make me think
that someone just
it is a
along the
name.
way. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he's a third cousin of a guy whose name is Ralph but spells it Rafe, it tells you that unusual things are happening in British naming of that kind.
Well, now, do you respect? There was something about the age of exploration. All the pith helmet guys out there discovering King Tut's tomb and whatnot, where it happened long enough ago that we can kind of say like, oh, it was this was an era of colonial rich dopes that were stealing the Elgin marbles and just generally like being insensitive, but also kind of discovering the world as we know it, or cataloging it at least. But this kind of rich, dilettantish behavior, does it still command respect? I mean, when I think of circumnavigating the globe north to south and back again, that's just, you'd have to be rich, but it's also just like such a novel notion. I kind of want to give a slow clap.
It's definitely a totally different pursuit because he's made it a kind of athletics. All these explorers of the first people to circumnavigate the earth were in it for
gold,
the money and the spices, and to have stuff named for them. And, it's definitely a sense of trying to recapture something of the probably fuzzily remembered romance of it, but overlaying it with a kind of, personal best kind of very 20th century achievement mentality, right? Mm-hmm. Like, can I be the first to do this, the first to do that? Magellan wasn't like, okay, everybody will remember me if.
Right.
Whereas
if I do this with one leg tied behind my back.
But I guess one thing I admire about it is very much a normal guy. Like, this guy's scaling Alps and Norwegian glaciers, despite the fact that he has a fear of heights. Good for him.
Oh. So there is this element, and this is true in ultra running too, that I describe as the hair shirt, the kind of self-abnegation of like defeating it's like the mortification of the flesh in a way, right? A secular version of that, or like a personal version of it.
I think it has to be once people have done Everest without oxygen, why is anyone trying Everest without oxygen if they can no longer be the first? Like, what you're really saying is, I'm going to push myself to do the harder thing. Right. I know I can do the one thing. How much more do I have to suffer? But maybe it's like me running Green Lake and just being happy that I feel good at the end. Maybe they don't enjoy the subjugation of the flesh. I mean, maybe they just like having said they did it.
The mountain climbers the elite mountain climbers all talk about it becoming an addiction, an obsession, well past the point that they've proved everything there is to prove.
They just have to be up there.
Yeah, and that, eventually they kind of all assume that they're going to die there just because they'll be driven to greater and greater challenges. And they talk about it the same way that you talk about addictions, where they wish that they could just give it up. They wish that it didn't haunt them in the night. And I wonder, this isn't a thing I've talked about with my ultra runner pal, but like how much of it becomes a thing that you wish you could overcome.
Like you wish you could turn it off?
Yeah. Or I mean, if there's no end to it, if you've run a 100 miler and now you're going to run a 200 miler, at what point are you?
You have to face the question of, is there anything unhealthy about addiction per se? If you're addicted to methamphetamine, that's very, the problem is not that your addictive personality. The problem is that you're putting stuff in your body that's poisoning you.
Yeah.
If you're addicted to something that's actually really good for your musculoskeletal system in general and is turning you into a new element unknown to man, is it still unhealthy to be addicted if you're addicted to fitness?
We don't talk about addiction in those terms, right? I mean, there are people who I would describe as addicted to their day planner.
Yeah.
Who every morning wake up, and if they're not making their breakfast at 7:59, they're going to lose their mind. And we don't think of that as an addiction. We might think of it as a kind of anal retentiveness or a personality disorder, but not a thing because it is so virtuous, or at least they talk about it as if it's a virtue. And there's nothing that seems more virtuous than this kind of crazy distance running. It's absolutely true. It just feels like, because it's like a monastic, it borders on what we think of as like monk behavior.
Yeah, we still have that throwback assumption that if that just doing something difficult is good for its own sake.
And the more difficult, the more good.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're depriving yourself of the depredation of luxury, or the like.
It does become more, I think it has become more convincing in modernity when you can see what more and more leisure and luxury does to you personally. And I don't think it's been good for my brain to have, fewer and fewer limits on my free time. I find myself having to, create new empires to conquer just so that I'm not twiddling my thumbs. I find that I have to work to keep myself off of my phone, just because that kind of behavior doesn't seem to be good for my brain either. So maybe there is something to it.
Why is aloneness with our thoughts considered? I guess
maybe that's because it's when you're aware of time passing. We think of other pastimes as losing time. Like, right. Because I was out with my friends and we were having such a good time. The hours just flew. Wow, that's 4 hours I'll never get back. Whereas if you're by yourself, you're bored enough that you're aware of the passage of time, and you thereby think, I'm really getting the most out of my allotted
I'm getting this hour
time on Earth,
squeezing every minute out of it. I mean, it's the core of Buddhism, right? The
present.
Yeah.
So Sir Ranulph has dabbled in ultra running in one of the most remarkable feats I can imagine. But, in the last 10 years, when you've seen his name in the news, it's largely been because of his failures. I mean, I don't want to gang up on the poor guy, but, he's a lot of these, if you do enough of these ambitious expeditions, they will not succeed. I mean, he failed in climbing Everest with a heart attack. He failed several times. Once with a heart attack that required a bypass. They had to take him off the mountain and give him a double bypass.
What?
In 2000, he had a plan to walk solo to the North Pole, but he ended up falling through the ice on his sleds, and he had to pull the ice out of the freezing water, and his frostbite got so bad in his hands that his fingertips died, and he ended up back at home sawing them off himself with a fret saw.
He's doing this by himself. When he got back home, don't you think that there were hospitals available?
I guess the hospital said, we don't want to amputate. Like the longer we can leave the necrotic tissue on, the healthier. And he finally just found it painful and annoying and said, bugger this, or whatever wealthy people say in Britain, and sawed off his own fingertips with a fret saw.
On both hands?
Just on his left hand. He's not an idiot.
All right, sure.
He's not crazy, John. In 2012, he was going to, again, this is his coldest journey campaign across Antarctica at the height of their winter. And he had to be evacuated by air, because it turns out some of these things that have not been done by anyone, it's because there's a reason why they haven't been done by anyone.
I'm surprised they could even fly a helicopter in those conditions.
Yeah, it's very easy to die doing some of these things. He is still with us. But in 2003, he had a plan to run 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days, which seems like the most bizarre ultra running feat I can imagine.
Because flying on an airplane is so bad for you anyway, just on its own. Like, you'd be recuperating from the last marathon at 30,000 feet on your way to the next marathon.
The logistics of it alone are very puzzling. Like, how do you even get to 7 continents in 7 days, let alone leave yourself enough time to run a marathon in each one? This was something he had agreed to do with a nutritionist named Mike Stroud, who had been an expedition mate of his on one of his polar expeditions. They had the whole thing planned for October 2003. And just, I think 3 or 4 months before they were going to start, he had his double bypass just off Everest. And so he's coming off a heart attack. He's recovering from a heart attack when he decides to do his 7 marathons in 7 days.
What was the hardest continent to run a marathon on?
Well, in his retelling of it, it's actually Asia, but not for the reason you would think. It was because Singapore is very muggy.
Right.
I think in terms of
polluted. Is Singapore clean?
Singapore's pretty clean.
You're not stepping in any gum.
You do 20 days in jail for gum. If I think as far as the planning angle, Antarctica would be
right
the hardest continent to run a marathon on. And in fact, that's where things went wrong from the beginning. The plan was originally to start on King George Island in the South Shetlands off the coast of Antarctica. So I guess you have to say that we're going to count this island as part of Antarctica. But that's okay. I mean, he ran the final leg. He ran the New York City Marathon, or at least the length of it. And that's an island off North America.
That'd be amazing if he culminated this run with a run like in the Boston Marathon itself.
And he got there late and had to pass everyone to get to the front. He did finish in New York. Was it the actual marathon? This account in The Guardian kind of implies that he did get to New York in time. So, their timeline is very limited because he has to do the 7th and final one and actually run the New York Marathon.
Right. Whoa.
Well, the one way to find this out is to see when the New York Marathon was.
There you go.
In 2003. Was it, in fact, the date of... Yes, it was. It was the first week in November.
Huh. How clever.
So, but to get this done, to arrive in New York in time for his 7th and final continent and run the New York Marathon, he needs to start in Antarctica on a certain date. And he settled for King George Island, which, when I looked it up, it's most famous as the place where Antarctica's first attempted murder happened in 2018.
Is there a year-round population? No, I don't think I do.
There's a Russian station that has a year-round population, enough that it has a permanently staffed Eastern Orthodox basilica, I think.
No kidding.
I think it might be Antarctica's only 24, full year priest. But in the Russian station at King George Island in, I think 2018, one of the Russian scientists tried to stab a Russian welder because the welder kept spoiling the endings of books.
The ultimate Russian murder mystery.
The Antarctica really gets to people, I guess. But apart from that cold case, King George Island is not in the news much. So his plan was King George Island and then up to Santiago, Chile to do the South American, and then to go west across the globe to follow the sun.
Oh yeah, okay.
But things went wrong from the beginning. Due to poor weather and engine trouble in his plane, he was unable to do the King George, to run a marathon on King George Island the day he had said. And so he had to immediately, he and his friend, his fellow adventurer, Dr. Stroud, had to change up their itinerary from the beginning. They decided to start, and tell me what you think about this, start on the Falkland Islands and call that Antarctica.
No, the Falkland Islands are Britain.
Well, it could be British Antarctica. Certainly, if you had to assign them a continent, it would be South America. That's the basis for the Argentine claim.
That's right. It would have to be South America. So no, already invalidated. But what I don't understand about a thing like this is you were intending to end in New York, and you have to be in New York on a certain day. If you can't run in Antarctica at the beginning, you just have to tack it on at the end. New York ends up being in the middle somewhere. I
think the problem is you cannot run the New York Marathon and then get down to Antarctica in time to run a marathon the next day, maybe?
I see.
Because think about the logistics. So here's his itinerary. It turns out to be Falkland Islands counted as Antarctica. Little iffy.
Nope.
You're already mad. Oh, no. He switched the order. He had to do, he did the South America race first by running in Argentina and then hopping over to the Falklands and calling that Antarctica. Then he has to get on a plane and get to Sydney, Australia, where it's already, I think, 12 or 13 hours later, and get in a race by the next day, because it's not just 7 marathons on 7 continents. It's got to be in 7 consecutive days.
I see.
So let's see. I mean, can you just the logistics alone? Let's say you you run the Falkland Islands leg as early as you can.
But you're down there at the bottom of the world, so it's a shorter distance between.
I looked on a globe.
Is that right?
It's still pretty. It looks to me like on a commercial jet, it would be closer to 12 hours than 10 between the Falklands and Sydney. And I'm sure he's, this is some benefit for the British Heart Foundation. So he's got money and I'm sure a private jet ferrying him around.
But would a flight like that go over the pole? It would have to, right? It's not going to go around. It's going to go over.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of a
transpolar flight.
But it still looks to me like it couldn't be much quicker than anywhere else on the American continent to Sydney.
Yeah.
Sydney's very far to the west. It's fully 12 hours to the time change is 12 hours to the west.
Right.
Or 13 maybe. It's already, it's already tomorrow morning right now in Sydney. So you're going to lose all that day just to the clock.
Right. But does that set you up to have more time if you head back the other direction? What came after Sydney?
Then he hops up to Singapore and does Asia. Then there's a long flight to London, which counts as Europe.
Right. And at that point, you're going back in time.
Yes, that's true. So that's working to his benefit, right? That's
right.
the Phileas Fogg around the world in 80 days thing. Then down to Cairo to run a marathon in Africa, and then across the Atlantic to New York.
Oh, so he went from Singapore to London. Which direction? He must have gone across the Pacific?
No, he went over Asia.
Oh, he did.
He's traveling west the whole time. And, once he crosses the international date line, that's the day you lose the most time. So you've got to run a 3-hour marathon that day, then take whatever, a 10-hour flight maybe, to get up to a place where it's 12 hours later in time to run another marathon. I mean, that's the diciest one right there.
Yeah.
But apart from the kind of asterisk on Antarctica, he ran 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. The privations included just the intense heat and 100% humidity of Singapore year round. It's on the equator. Which he described as hell on earth, and his companion actually had some kind of stomach upset and ended up walking most of the Singapore marathon. The Cairo marathon he did on 4 hours sleep. And he ran a marathon in London, got 4 hours sleep, and then ran a marathon in Cairo.
Ugh. Are these marathons that included other people that were like previously scheduled marathons where?
I'm pretty sure the Falklands one wasn't. No, in most of these cases, it's him and his buddy running a 26.2 mile course.
So you could conceivably just land at the airport, run around
in circles
the airport,
on the runway?
Yeah, for 26 miles and get back on a plane.
Yes, and I'm sure that's what happened in cases like Cairo where he was kind of down to the wire. So I was interested in, when I first read about this, I was like, how does anyone, much less this British heart attack recovering patient in his 50s, run 7 continents, 7 days? So I looked to see what the record is. And it turns out there is some contention. There's a San Antonio lawyer named Larry Macon who claims to have run 239 marathons in a row. In 239 days. He ran a daily marathon for almost 8 months.
On his treadmill in his office?
No.
While he was on the phone?
No, many of them organized marathons and some not. He's just driving around from marathon to marathon and
traveling.
And he says that's the hardest part is the logistics of it and just figuring out where you can get to for the next day to keep the streak going.
Is there a marathon season in the United States where it's like, this is peak marathon season. I can do 239 marathons.
Just due to weather. They avoid, many places avoid snow, places that have to avoid snow, places that have to avoid hot weather.
Right.
But I have found a a marathon investigation website that is very skeptical of Mr. Macon's claims.
Oh, what
Because,
did they say?
he lists itineraries that they say are impossible. There's no way to run that marathon and then get to New Mexico in time to run the next one. He says he did 3 that weekend, and the drive times just make it impossible.
I see.
And it's true that Guinness has not verified his run. I think Guinness has, the record holder for most marathons in a year, and Guinness is still, dozens off that pace. But there is, lest we overpraise Sir Ranulph Fiennes, the third Baronet of Banbury, there is a Spaniard, a factory worker in Navarre named Ricardo Abad, who claims to have run 607 consecutive marathons in 607 consecutive days.
Oh.
For almost 2 years.
He ran 26 miles
He
a
ran
day.
26 miles every day. And, it's the kind of thing where people, he raises money, people buy in for €1 a kilometer or whatever.
26 miles in an organized marathon every day.
No.
Okay.
I'm sure but he considers that his ultra marathon. He's running a daily marathon for 2 years. So the kind of thing that you and I would have to work up to fitness wise over the course of years is just his daily, it's his job now, I guess. Actually, it's not his job. He was still working 8-hour shifts in his factory. And then he would run a marathon. He would either run a marathon in the morning before going to work, or he would get off work and run a marathon at night. Sometimes he ran 2 marathons in less than 12 hours, depending on when his shifts got scheduled.
So it says that an average marathon time is 4 to 5 hours.
I'm going to assume these ultra marathoners are good enough that their times are closer to 3.
Well, it says that, elite runners can run a marathon in 2 hours. Beating 4 hours is a major accomplishment for most people.
Yeah. Peter Sagal was very excited when he got closer to 3 than 4, I remember. And he's much closer to 3 than 4 now.
Is that right?
Yeah. Whenever
he talks about marathon running, I just
stop listening.
Well, I don't know. I start to gaze out the window and look at all the pretty girls and the flowers in the flower boxes, and then I come back when he starts talking about his kids.
Well, all the pretty girls that will be attracted to him when they find out that he's
I guess so.
a fit marathon runner.
I suppose.
I mean, he sells it to me as really the only sport you can age into with excellence. Where it's
pretty
really
girls like rhinoceroses too.
Rhinoceri.
Rhinoceria.
Rhinoceria? Do not give any of these girls rhinoceria.
And that concludes Ultra Running. Entry 1357.IS4031. Certificate number 20800 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, I'm sure that all of your friends that are marathon runners are posting about it on their Facebook page. At this very moment, even 1,000 years from now, whatever like octopus version of an ultra marathon is.
Well, if you imagine that evolution is pushing toward greater efficiency, then future listeners will probably be laughing at 26 miles or 100 miles pushing our limits.
Sure, because futurelings are all unladen African swallows.
No, they could be 1,000-legged centipedes. Then maybe they never stop moving. They're the snow piercers of the future.
Super hauling all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they're on a different scale, right? So a centipede, even though maybe traveling very fast relative to its size, thinks of 26 miles as a lifetime endeavor.
That's kind of what I like about long walking, is that you're covering a space that seems like it's a car trip. You're like, look at this magic trick I did.
Yeah.
Normally, I would take a car to downtown, but I just walked it like a superhero. I don't know. Maybe if they really are so ever moving, maybe their marathon is actually, how long can you sit still?
How long? Well, I know there are quite a few people I know that would consider it much harder to sit in one place all day than
and any school child trying to sit through a 6.5 hour school day.
Right. Or my sister, who is like a school child. For my part, the day that I walked further than a horse could walk, a regular horse that would just be like, if I'd been on a horse.
Was there a horse following you so you knew exactly when that moment was?
No, but I did a little bit of research, like how far do you go on a horse in a day? And it was, it was an amount that I could exceed past a certain point, and then I could walk much further than a horse could walk. And I was just like, I'm like at a different level now, man. I'm better. I'm tougher than a horse.
Maybe this was the crisis that Nietzsche had when he saw the horse.
Yeah, he was like, don't flog that horse. That horse.
Or maybe
a horse is a horse.
Maybe he just walked faster than the horse, and he was
walked faster over to the horse to hug it.
I guess.
I don't know. To be able to travel 100 miles a day on foot or by your own under your own power, that just has such a I don't know. Like
even on a bike, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Even if you're getting the mechanical advantage of the bike, you really do feel like you did it.
Yeah, and that you've done something that few people can claim to have done. Although, as you were telling me earlier.
It's absurdly common in the suburbs.
300,000 Americans.
Every single Amazon employee has run a marathon this year.
If you want to talk to us about this more and tell us all about your marathon...
Because your friends are sick of it.
...history, please write us at petersagal@petersagal.com. No, you can write us at the Omnibus Project at gmail.com, or you can tweet Ken at Ken Jennings, or you can tweet selfies to me at Instagram at John Roderick.
Tweet John your running selfies. Feel great in your spandex.
You can mail us your gold medals and your ribbons from all the marathons you've been in at P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155, or your granddad's old medals, his Civil War medals, your great-great-great-granddad's Civil War medals, or your great-grandmother's war that she got from the French government during World War I.
Or her own private war against alcoholism. Mm-hmm. Whatever.
Send us your grandmother's 15-year coin. You can hang out with other Futurelings in the various social media places under the Futurelings moniker. And if you would like to support the show, we appreciate it very much. Your contributions, however large or small, greatly aid us in the production of this show, and there are lots of benefits to being a Patreon supporter of Omnibus. So go on over to patreon.com/omnibusproject.
I'm actually looking at some mail right now from a Patreon supporter, Michael R. Clark, at the Lobster Person tier from Ontario. Is talking about the legalization of different kinds of green funerals in his home province
of Ontario. Sure.
But he also sent us some social currency.
What is that?
Well, it's two different denominations. Social currency created to recognize the power of its value. I guess the idea is if you don't mint pieces of paper about a certain virtue, then we will not respect it as much as money. So he sent us social currency of laughter.
Oh, that's nice.
Pictured a laughing guy. And the social currency of knowledge. Pictured some kind of smart-looking dodecahedron thing.
That looks like a 20-sided die.
I don't know. Did he mint this himself? Maybe.
What? They seem a little bit like those dollars that I used to give to my dad at Christmas time that said "good for one hug."
That's basically what this is, but instead of hugs, it's laughter and knowledge. Good for one laugh. I'll laugh at one of your jokes, John, if you give me this. I see. It's from Value Investment Alliance.
What does that mean?
I don't know. It's whatever the website is that is. It's an art project that he.
Artists
that he frequented. Artists love putting money in stuff and making us be like, boo, money. But these guys have moved beyond that. Like, they're not making like a $100 bill collage out of poop or whatever. These guys are making new, better money. We also, speaking of Canada, got birthday cards from Matthew and Jen and family who sent us Christmas cards.
Oh, nice.
Both honor Canadian heroes. One for these iconic First Nations Cowichan sweaters.
Okay.
Of British Columbia. I don't know who the hero is. Either the...
I have a large collection of those sweaters.
Well, now you have a birthday card about them. And I got one celebrating a good Canadian screw.
So
It's the Robertson square-tipped screwdriver and screw, which is apparently one of the 10 greatest Canadian inventions of all time.
Why is the mailbag spitting up so much Canada-centric stuff?
I don't know. But you know what the Canadian Postal Service right now is doing? Is stamping thanks healthcare workers on its envelopes, or merci personnel soignant. We also got, speaking of weird denominations, this is good. This is from Eric. Apparently recently on the show, I said that for a 5-figure donation, you would get to shoot a gun at me.
Oh. But you didn't say which denomination.
You corrected it to 6 figures, but it doesn't matter because this guy has a $1 million Turkish old lira note, which was legal tender in Turkey as recently as 15 years ago.
Yes, I remember using those bills.
And with a $1 million note, he is now allowed to shoot at me multiple times, perhaps as many as 10 times.
I will trade you whatever you want for that bill because it's very evocative to me, that Turkish lira bill.
But if I give this to you, will you shoot at me 10 times?
If you give that to me, I will defend you against someone trying to shoot
against Eric?
at you. I will.
Okay.
I'll fight Eric.
That's fair. That's fair. You're now my bodyguard.
Wow, look at this. I haven't seen one of these in so long.
Eric didn't think I would wriggle out of his clutches.
Oh, wow.
You shouldn't have sent the money up front, Eric. You should have shot first.
That's so great. I remember getting these out of a cash machine and having no idea what this meant in terms of American dollars and feeling like, okay, I have 1 million of these now? Is this like... What is this? Is this worth $10? Is it worth $500?
I've always thought it was weird that Turkey had lira anyway. Why does Turkey have lira?
Lira, there is a story behind that.
Maybe Italy's the lira appropriator. Maybe it is a Middle Eastern or Near Eastern currency. Who knows?
We'll do it on a future omnibus.
We will.
Maybe.
Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that ultrarunning extends far into the future, no matter how many legs you have, because the catastrophe fear has been averted. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. And we will never get to the bottom of why Turkey has lira.
Well, it was introduced by Charlemagne, and it's derived from the Latin libra, meaning silver.
So it did go from Italy to Turkey, but it was Charlemagne's.
Yeah.
The Holy Roman Empire extended into Turkey, huh?
There it is. Well, at least the money did.
Who knew? But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.